Hey guys, what's up? It's Caden from the Code Bros. Today we're going to be doing lesson 8, which is going to be covering value as compared to reference when passing values to functions. So let's get started. Alrighty, so in today's lesson we're more or less just going to be doing a comparison of reference and value and going over a little bit of code that's going to kind of show you what's going on behind the hood. Alrighty, so passing by value. So passing by value actually creates a new variable, and it just stores the value that was passed to the function inside of that variable. So if you look at this example here, we have an integer value that gets assigned 0. So when I call pass by value and pass in that value variable, what I'm doing is passing 0 into this function. This variable here called new value is going to catch that 0 and assign its value as 0. So when I display new value, it displays a 0. If I add 5 to it and display that, it's going to display 5. Now if I come back to main and display value after the function call, it doesn't display 5. It actually still displays 0 because this value back here wasn't changed. It was this variable being changed inside the function. Passing by reference is a bit different. So passing by reference creates a new variable, but the identifier of the new variable actually just references the same memory location as the variable that was passed in. So if you were to take the integer value that was assigned 0 and pass it into this pass by reference function, and since it is caught as a reference, that's denoted here by this ampersand. That's how you tell the difference. If you look back at the last slide, it was just int value. When you're passing by reference, you want to use the ampersand in between the data type and the identifier, and that lets it know that it is catching as reference. Anyways, so when we display the new value, it's still going to display 0 because it caught 0 and was assigned that value. But really what it's doing is pointing to that same memory spot that value's at. So if we add 5 to it and display that value, it's still going to display 5. But this variable and this variable are both pointing to the same spot in memory. And so when you add 5 to this over here, it makes changes back here as well. And so when you see out value after passing by reference here, it's going to display 5 as well. Alrighty, so let's jump into some code, and then I have a little picture just in Paint. It's kind of nice to use Paint kind of as like a whiteboard. I definitely recommend if you're getting into programming to grab a whiteboard and stuff. It's just hard to show that in a video, so I use Paint on my computer as kind of like a virtual whiteboard. Anyway, let's jump into some code. I have the skeleton kind of written out here, and we'll just kind of start filling in the blanks. First off, what I'm going to do is say the value variable. So we have these two variables. One's a value example and one's a reference example. They're both going to be assigned 0 at the start. Anyways, we have value variable before function, and I'm going to just go ahead and display that value example. Then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this a couple times. And then I'm going to say value variable after function is that, and then display that same variable. Then I'm going to say reference variable before function and display the reference example. And reference variable after function and display that reference example. Now in between these, I'm going to say function call here, just make a quick note for myself so I remember later on. Perfect. Now let's start writing these functions out. To start with, we're going to do pass by value. And what I'm just going to do is simply do a cout statement so you can see what value gets passed in. So we're going to say value passed in, and we'll display that value parameter. And then we're going to do value after changes. It'll be value parameter again. And in between those cout statements, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to say value parameter plus equals 10. Come back up to main and call the function. We're going to call pass by value. Pass in the value example. And then let's go ahead and run that code real quick. So just kind of paying attention to these three lines and the lines inside of that function, as you can see, value variable before function was 0. The value that gets passed in is the 0 from the value example, and it gets passed into this value parameter. That's what's being displayed here. We add 10 to that value parameter, and we can see after the changes that it displays 10. And then after the function call, we're going to see out this value example again, and it's still 0. So the changes in here didn't happen to the variable out here, as you can see. So then heading over to my little whiteboard paint thing I have going on over here, let's take a look at the difference here between value and reference. So I have this value example variable, and that's pointing to 10. Or sorry, that's pointing to the 0. Now when I make the pass by value call, it creates this value parameter here. And that creates some new memory that stores an integer, and it passes in that 0 value. And this variable points here. Alrighty, so then I add 10 to that, so now it becomes 10. And then I leave the function call. So this variable actually gets destroyed after that. And then up in main, value example still remains the same as that 0 when it was passed in. Alrighty, so now let's write pass by reference, which is going to be very similar as pass by value. So instead of value, we'll change it to reference. Other than that, it's going to pretty much be the same. We'll change the variable name to reference parameter. And then make sure we do the function call. Let's say pass by reference, pass in the ref example. Alrighty, so now let's take a look at the code. So line by line here, we have reference variable before function is 0. The reference that gets passed in, its value is 0. After we made changes inside the function, it's now 10 because we added 10 to it. And then if we look at the ref example that we passed in, after the function call, it keeps that change of 10, as you can see here when it displays the value. So let's go back here and see what's going on with that. So when this variable starts off, the ref example, it starts with a value of 0. And ref example is pointing to it. Now when I make that function call, it creates this reference parameter variable. But since it's passed by reference, what really happens is it doesn't create a new box and store 0 inside of it and point to this box here in memory. What it does is actually just takes this variable and says, I'm looking at this location as well. So anything that I do to this value, anything else that's looking at this memory location is going to see those changes as well. So it adds 10, so the change goes through, and we display that change, and then the function ends. And this variable is out of the scope, no longer exists, and the line gets destroyed to it. But reference example is still pointing to that same memory location. So the 10 that changed, it sees that change went through. So when we run it and everything, as you can see, the change does stay. And you can see that the reference variable after the function call keeps that value of 10. Anyway guys, that was a quick introduction into passing by reference versus passing by value. Another thing I do want to note is you can actually do the same for return types. So you can return by value, and you can return by reference, just like that. Or just like that. I don't know why. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, I was wondering why it was yelling at me. Sometimes it just takes a second. Anyway, so yeah, you can return by value, you can return by reference, you can pass by value, and you can pass by reference. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure you guys knew kind of the difference between those things, because starting off with lesson 9, things are going to pick up in difficulty quite a bit. We're going to jump into pointers, and I'm going to kind of ease you into it nice. But pointers are where this language really starts getting a little bit trickier. And so I just wanted to make sure you are all up to date on passing by reference, passing by value, because those things are going to become very apparent soon. But look forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do some really, really cool stuff with pointers. And yeah, hope to see you guys in the next one. Definitely leave a comment if you have any questions about this stuff. And or shoot me an email, Caden@thecodebros.com. Thanks, guys. Peace.